announcing today a major show of military force in the region.
Before the sun rises over the narrow waters of the Strait of Hormuz, before satellites update their feeds and headlines begin to scroll across glowing screens, something moves in the dark. Radar operators aboard the world's most advanced aircraft carrier detect faint, fast-moving signatures skimming across the surface of the sea. At first, they appear as scattered anomalies, fragments of static in the pre-dawn haze. Then the pattern sharpens. Dozens of small, high-speed craft, running without lights, converging from multiple directions. This is not an exercise. This is not a routine interception. In this hypothetical flashpoint, Venezuelan naval strike units attempt the unthinkable. A coordinated swarm assault against a U.S. carrier strike group built around the USS Gerald R. the most technologically advanced warship ever put to sea. What happens next is a test not only of firepower, but of doctrine, nerve, and the future of naval warfare itself. For decades, military analysts have warned that massive capital ships could be vulnerable to asymmetrical tactics. Cheap, agile platforms overwhelming billion-dollar defenses through speed and saturation. Tonight, that theory collides with reality. The attacking flotilla relies on dispersion, maneuverability, and synchronized timing, seeking to exploit the narrow sea room and compress reaction windows to seconds. On the carrier's bridge, decisions must be made instantly. Defensive systems spin to life. Close-in weapon mounts track targets at blinding speed. Electronic warfare suites attempt to jam communications and distort coordination among the incoming boats. Fighter jets are readied on deck, their engines whining as deck crews race against the clock. The sea becomes a chessboard where every move is measured in lives and geopolitical consequences. One breakthrough could alter the balance of power in a region already strained by rivalry and mistrust. One miscalculation could ignite a broader confrontation no one can easily contain. Yet beneath the roar of engines and the crack of naval gunfire lies a deeper question. Has the age of the supercarrier reached its most dangerous crossroads? In this scenario, we explore how a modern swarm attack might unfold, how layered defenses are designed to respond, and why even the most advanced fleet must constantly adapt to evolving threats. From the first radar contact to the final retreat across smoke-streaked waters, we will examine the tactics, the technology, and the human decisions that determine survival in high-intensity naval combat. This is not just a clash of ships, it is a clash of strategies, of industrial might versus improvisational speed, of tradition versus disruption. As you watch, consider how rapidly the character of war can shift, and how fragile dominance can become when challenged in confined waters under cover of darkness. The battle you are about to witness is fictional, but the lessons it reflects are grounded in real strategic debates shaping navies around the world today. In the next minutes, we step into that volatile dawn, where alarms echo across steel decks and the horizon fills with uncertainty. In the final hour before dawn, the waters of the Strait of Hormuz are often deceptively calm. Nearly a fifth of the world's traded oil passes through this narrow corridor each day, and warships from multiple nations routinely patrol its constricted shipping lanes. On this particular morning, visibility hovers just above 3 nautical miles, with a low marine layer blurring the horizon and muting the stars. Aboard the USS Gerald R. the watch rotation is midway through a standard readiness cycle. The carrier strike group is operating in a layered formation. Guided missile destroyers positioned several miles out, a cruiser offset to cover the main shipping channel, and combat air patrol aircraft scheduled to launch at first light. Nothing in the routine traffic patterns initially suggests imminent danger. At 4:17 local time, however, a radar operator in the ship's Combat Information Center notices a cluster of faint returns emerging from coastal clutter along the northern edge of the strait. Small contacts are not unusual in this region. Fishing dhows, commercial skiffs, and patrol boats create a constant mosaic of movement. But these returns are different. They are tightly grouped, then suddenly disperse into multiple vectors, accelerating in a pattern that algorithms flag as coordinated maneuvering rather than random civilian traffic. The ship's advanced dual-band radar, designed to track both high-altitude aircraft and sea-skimming threats, recalibrates to refine the picture. Within seconds, the system estimates more than 24 fast-moving surface craft, each traveling above 40 knots, well beyond the speed of local fishing vessels. Standard procedure dictates verification before escalation. An airborne early warning aircraft, already warming up on deck for its scheduled sortie, is rapidly launched ahead of plan to extend the radar horizon. Its sensors confirm the surface picture and add another layer of concern. Intermittent bursts of encrypted radio traffic among the approaching boats. Intelligence briefings in the preceding weeks had noted an uptick in Venezuelan naval exercises, emphasizing distributed maritime tactics and high-speed interception drills. While no official warning had been issued, analysts had quietly assessed that small craft operating in coordinated swarm formations could attempt to test the defensive envelope of a carrier strike group in confined waters. At 4:23, the tactical action officer recommends elevating the readiness condition. Across the carrier and its escorts, a quiet but unmistakable shift occurs. Watertight doors are secured. Additional watchstanders take their stations. Missile crews move to consoles, running rapid diagnostic checks on vertical launch systems loaded with surface-to-air interceptors. Close-in weapon systems, normally in standby, are powered up and set to automatic tracking mode. On the flight deck, deck crews in colored jerseys sprint to reposition aircraft, clearing space for potential rapid launches. The hum of auxiliary power units grows louder, blending with the steady thrum of the carrier's nuclear reactors deep below. The approaching formation continues to fan outward, now clearly angling to converge from multiple bearings. The geometry is troubling. By spreading out, the small craft reduce the effectiveness of any single defensive axis and compress decision timelines. A destroyer on the outer screen reports visual confirmation through infrared optics. Low silhouettes, minimal running lights, and wake signatures consistent with heavily loaded fast attack boats. Although no weapons are yet visible, the intent appears increasingly hostile. The rules of engagement require clear demonstration of threat before kinetic response, but defensive systems are authorized to lock and track. At 4:31, one of the outer escorts broadcasts a warning over maritime emergency channels in multiple languages, ordering the unidentified vessels to alter course immediately. For several seconds, the radar picture shows no change. Then a subset of the contacts increases speed, cutting sharply toward the carrier's projected path. In the Combat Information Center, the air is cool but tense, illuminated by the glow of multifunction displays. The commanding officer is briefed in concise, clipped phrases. Number of contacts, range decreasing, estimated time to intercept under 10 minutes. The strike group shifts from routine patrol posture to full combat readiness in less than 5. What began as ambiguous radar noise has crystallized into a coordinated approach that can no longer be dismissed as coincidence. In the narrow confines of the strait, with commercial tankers only miles away and regional tensions simmering beneath the surface, every decision now carries strategic weight. The moment of uncertainty is ending. The first phase of the confrontation, detection, assessment, and transition to battle stations, has unfolded in barely 15 minutes, yet it has transformed a quiet maritime watch into the brink of open conflict. As the distance closes, the shape of the threat becomes unmistakable. What had first appeared as scattered radar returns now resolves into a deliberately structured formation. Dozens of compact, high-speed attack craft spreading outward in a widening arc before pivoting inward again, like a tightening net. Naval analysts have long described this as swarm doctrine, an asymmetric tactic built around speed, dispersion, and simultaneous pressure from multiple vectors. In open ocean, a carrier strike group benefits from depth and maneuvering room, but inside the narrow confines of the Strait of Hormuz, the geometry favors those willing to gamble on proximity. The attacking boats exploit coastal clutter, commercial traffic lanes, and even the radar shadows cast by large tankers transiting nearby shipping channels. The Venezuelan crews, according to intelligence assessments compiled in previous months, had reportedly trained in distributed maritime operations designed to stress test advanced naval defenses. While Venezuela does not traditionally project power in the Persian Gulf, this fictional scenario assumes a limited expeditionary deployment of fast attack units as part of a broader political signaling effort. Roughly 70% of the tactical framework is consistent with real-world swarm theory. Small vessels operating independently but linked by encrypted communications, programmed to converge at pre-designated waypoints, each tasked with a specific approach corridor to dilute defensive fire. The remaining details, the rumored integration of improvised low-cost decoys and experimental signal repeaters mounted on civilian hulls, add an edge of unpredictability without straying too far from plausible capability. On radar screens inside the U.S. formation, the boats do not move as a single mass. Instead, they fracture into clusters of 3 to 5, each cluster adjusting speeds slightly differently to create uneven timing. This staggered acceleration is intentional. By avoiding a uniform wave, the attackers attempt to overload tracking algorithms that prioritize the most imminent threats. Some craft slow briefly, appearing almost to fall behind, only to surge forward again along unexpected bearings. Others drift closer to commercial vessels, blurring identification thresholds and complicating rules of engagement. The objective is not immediate impact, but cognitive saturation, forcing commanders to divide attention across a constantly shifting mosaic of contacts. Visually, through long-range electro-optical systems, the boats present minimal profiles. Low hulls, matte finishes to reduce glare, and reinforced bows capable of carrying mounted weapons. Though no missiles are visibly fired at this stage, several craft appear to be equipped with heavy machine guns and shoulder-fired rockets, common armaments for fast attack platforms worldwide. The danger lies less in any single boat's firepower and more in the aggregate effect. If even a handful breach the outer defensive ring, they could threaten escorts at close range, or force the carrier to maneuver sharply in restricted waters, disrupting flight operations. The swarm's formation begins to resemble a crescent, with the open end pointing toward the carrier strike group's projected course. Two outer destroyers adjust position slightly, careful not to overextend from mutual support. The attacking boats exploit this caution. A subgroup accelerates toward the western flank, drawing targeting radars in that direction, while another group angles from the east at lower speed, staying just outside immediate engagement range. It is a calculated gamble. By pressing from multiple azimuths, they hope to trigger defensive responses piecemeal, rather than in a synchronized barrage. Communications intercepts suggest tightly choreographed timing. In this dramatized account, analysts later speculate that the attackers relied on a preloaded digital maneuver script, allowing each boat to execute turns and speed changes even if central command links were disrupted. Whether true or not, the effect is striking. The swarm appears almost organic, adjusting fluidly to the strike group's maneuvers. As distances shrink below 10 nautical miles, wake patterns intensify, white arcs cutting across the dim surface of the water under the fading night sky. The attacking crews count on the physics of proximity. Small craft traveling at 45 to 50 knots can close several miles in minutes. In such compressed timelines, defensive systems must detect, classify, assign, and engage targets in rapid succession. Even the most advanced layered defense, combining long-range missiles, medium-caliber naval guns, and close-in weapon systems, faces strain when confronted with dozens of fast, low-profile threats approaching from divergent bearings. The swarm tactic is designed to exploit that strain, betting that confusion and saturation can create a fleeting window of vulnerability. By the time the first warning shots are contemplated, the geometry of the engagement has fully shifted. What began as distant radar anomalies has evolved into a coordinated, multi-vector advance pressing toward critical range. The swarm has deployed, not as a reckless charge, but as a calculated, adaptive maneuver intended to test every layer of the carrier group's defenses at once. The first shots are not the thunder of missiles, but the sharp staccato flashes of tracer fire skimming low across the water. As several of the lead boats cross an invisible threshold, what naval tacticians refer to as weapons release authority range. Muzzle bursts erupt from their forward mounts. Streams of heavy-caliber rounds arc toward the outer screen of destroyers, splashing short at first, then walking closer as the gunners adjust. One vessel fires a pair of unguided rockets that streak erratically, detonating harmlessly in the water, but sending towering plumes skyward. The psychological line has been crossed. Within seconds, the response from the U.S. formation is measured, layered, and overwhelming. A guided missile destroyer on the eastern flank is the first to answer with precision munitions, launching a short-range, surface-to-surface missile configured for small, fast targets. The missile's booster ignites in a white flare before it arcs downward and strikes a lead craft amidships, splitting it in a bloom of flame and debris. Almost simultaneously, 5-inch naval guns begin firing high-explosive shells in rapid succession, their automated fire control systems calculating lead angles against boats weaving at high speed. The concussive rhythm of outgoing fire reverberates across the water, overlapping with the mechanical roar of close-in weapon systems spooling up. On board the USS Gerald R. the Combat Information Center assigns targets in real time, balancing missile expenditure against the density of the swarm. Long-range interceptors are held in reserve. This fight is unfolding at distances where rapid-fire guns and short-range defensive systems are most effective. As previously noted, aircraft had been readied earlier than scheduled. Now, 2 strike fighters catapult from the deck in quick succession, their afterburners briefly illuminating the carrier's island superstructure. They climb steeply before banking outward to establish a protective umbrella, sensors sweeping for any indication that the surface assault is a diversion for an aerial or missile strike. The attackers press forward despite early losses. Several boats zigzag aggressively, attempting to close inside the effective envelope of medium-caliber naval guns. At this stage, coordination becomes both their strength and their vulnerability. A cluster of 3 vessels accelerates in tight formation, evidently intending to overwhelm a single defensive axis. The defending destroyer responds with a rolling barrage, airburst rounds detonating just ahead of the lead craft. Fragments shred its superstructure, and it veers off trailing smoke, colliding with one of its companions in a chaotic tangle of debris and spray. Then the engagement escalates further. A handful of surviving boats reach what analysts would later describe as critical distance, close enough that even small warheads or explosive-laden hulls could inflict serious damage if allowed to impact. Automated close-in weapon systems, their radars locked, unleash streams of 20mm rounds at thousands of rounds per minute. The effect is surgical and brutal. Boats disintegrate under the concentrated fire, engines rupturing, hulls splintering. The sea becomes a mosaic of burning wreckage and drifting fragments, lit intermittently by muzzle flashes and secondary explosions. Yet not all the incoming threats are neutralized at once. One fast craft, hugging the wake of a large commercial tanker as partial cover, emerges unexpectedly within a narrow defensive seam between 2 escorts. For a brief moment, its silhouette is visible against the rising glow of dawn, its bow-mounted launcher angled forward. A rapid response from a nearby cruiser, firing a burst from its forward gun at near point-blank maritime range, shatters the vessel before it can discharge its payload. Later analysis would suggest the boat carried a heavier charge than most, possibly intended as a sacrificial breakthrough unit. As the volume of incoming fire diminishes, the balance of initiative shifts decisively. The swarm's synchronized timing begins to unravel under sustained losses and electronic disruption. Defensive electronic warfare systems, activated at full power, interfere with short-range communications among the remaining boats. Some attackers continue their programmed approach patterns, but without real-time coordination, their maneuvers lose cohesion. A few turn away abruptly, either damaged or recognizing the futility of pressing further into concentrated fire. Above, the launched fighters now contribute directly. Operating under strict rules to avoid collateral damage near civilian shipping, they employ precision-guided munitions and cannon fire against isolated clusters attempting to regroup at the periphery. From altitude, the pilots can see the broader geometry of the battle. scattered wakes, drifting smoke, and the disciplined spacing of the carrier's escorts maintaining their defensive arcs. The air component extends the strike group's reach, ensuring that retreating craft cannot simply reset and attempt another concentrated push. Within the surface formation, commanders make a critical decision not to pursue recklessly into congested waters. Instead, they advance methodically, tightening the perimeter and focusing on neutralizing any craft still displaying hostile intent. This disciplined restraint prevents overextension and preserves the integrity of the protective screen around the carrier. Missile inventories are assessed, gun barrels monitored for overheating, and damage control teams report minor superficial impacts but no significant penetration of armored hulls. The psychological turning point becomes evident when multiple attacking boats break formations simultaneously, scattering toward coastal waters. What began as an aggressive, synchronized crescent has fragmented into individual survival sprints. Defensive fire shifts from reactive to selective, targeting only those units that continue to maneuver in a threatening profile. The sea, once crowded with converging wakes, now shows widening gaps between fleeing craft. In the aftermath of the climax, the initiative rests entirely with the carrier strike group. Surveillance assets track the retreating vessels, while helicopters launch to conduct visual confirmation and ensure no damaged craft drift back into shipping lanes as hazards. The airspace remains secured, combat air patrols orbiting as a precaution against secondary threats. The engagement, intense but relatively brief, underscores both the potency and the limits of swarm tactics against a fully alert, layered naval defense. By the time the sun fully crests the horizon, the water bears the scars of the confrontation. Patches of burning fuel dissipating, rescue beacons blinking among debris, and the distant silhouettes of surviving boats disappearing toward shore. The strike group resumes controlled maneuvering, maintaining heightened readiness, but no longer under immediate assault. The attempted saturation has failed. The defensive architecture, integrated sensors, disciplined command decisions, coordinated surface and air response, has held. In less than an hour, the battle has surged from first exchange to culmination and resolution, leaving behind not a shattered carrier, but a reaffirmation of how modern naval forces adapt, absorb shock, and reclaim dominance once the fog of engagement lifts. As the last hostile wakes fade toward the horizon, the tempo of combat gives way to controlled dominance. The carrier strike group does not immediately relax. Doctrine demands confirmation that the threat has been fully neutralized. Maritime patrol helicopters sweep low over the engagement area, using forward-looking infrared sensors to distinguish between burning debris and disabled craft still capable of movement. Unmanned aerial systems extend the surveillance perimeter several dozen nautical miles outward, ensuring no secondary wave is forming beyond visual range. What had been a chaotic battle space only minutes earlier is methodically converted into a monitored security zone. Pursuit is deliberate rather than impulsive. Fast response boats, launched from escorting destroyers, intercept two damaged attack craft drifting at low speed, their crews signaling distress. Under the laws of armed conflict and long-standing naval custom, survivors are recovered once they are no longer considered active combatants. Medical teams treat burns and shrapnel wounds in makeshift triage areas on the decks of escorts, a reminder that even high-intensity engagements do not suspend humanitarian obligations. At the same time, intelligence specialists begin cataloging wreckage patterns and electronic signatures recorded during the clash. Every fragment of data, radio frequencies used, maneuver timing, propulsion performance, feeds into after-action analysis. The broader waterway remains open, a critical priority given the strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz to global energy markets. Commercial tankers that had altered course during the fighting are gradually guided back into established traffic separation schemes. Coordination with regional maritime authorities stabilizes the flow of shipping, preventing the confrontation from triggering wider economic shock. Within hours, official statements emphasize freedom of navigation and defensive action, carefully calibrated to deter further escalation while avoiding rhetoric that could ignite a broader crisis. On board the USS Gerald R. the mood shifts from combat intensity to analytical focus.